Yeah, we're gonna do. I'm probably the only person with this ticket, but it's pretty easy to see why this number's steamed.
It's that time for some trash. The trash man is here.
Are you going to be on Team McMurphy, or are you going to be on Team Wilson here with the Razorbacks in Oklahoma State this week? I got to know before we start.
The Big Bets on Campus podcast.
All right, here we go.
What's up, Degenerate Nation? Welcome to the Big Bets on Campus podcast. This is the Week 2 college football betting preview. I'm Stuckey, and joining me, as always, my fellow BBOC co-host, Colin Wilson. We will hit all of the marquee games today. We will go 3 and out to close out the show, which if you haven't already found out about is live on YouTube, 6 p.m. Eastern. If you want to get a head start, make sure you subscribe to our new BBOC YouTube channel. Hit the like on that video, really help us out as we're trying to build that channel. We'll also get to some Arkansas football, some San Jose State. We even have some FCS games that we're going to talk about. And of course, the trash segment. And oh boy, it's extra smelly this weekend. Colin, I'm going to call this, just looked at the outline, saw some of your bets. This is going to be a lot of weeks we agree. I think this is going to be the disagreement pod. One of us might have a much better week than the other. So I think those make for the most interesting podcasts, presenting both sides. But you ready to get things started?
I am, but I'm just dying with anticipation here. Are you going to be on Team McMurphy, or are you going to be on Team Wilson here with the Razorbacks in Oklahoma State this week? I got to know before we start.
I don't know. I'm having trouble with that game. Oklahoma State, I mean, from a yardage perspective, it was a pretty even game against South Dakota State, but they built a big lead, which was impressive. Arkansas, I just don't. That's the like weeks 1 and 2 college football for me are always tough. Not totally in love with this card, and with roster turnovers, it's hard to get a true feel for some of these teams and determining how much do I adjust teams' power ratings, especially when the data point comes against FCS teams, which you see a lot of in week 1 and week 2. Arkansas is a perfect example. Like, how much do I take away from what they did against a bad Arkansas Pine Bluff team? Right. Very difficult to grasp. With the 7.5, I'd lean Arkansas, but not a game I have a strong conviction on, so I don't think I'll be betting it. But
I'm ready to chop it up.
Yeah, we'll get to that game later. Let's start things off with our marquee matchups of the weekend. All right, we'll kick things off with the big noon kickoff on Fox, which won't start at noon. I'll never stop complaining about that. Between Michigan and Texas. Texas, 7.5-point favorite as we record this. Texas obviously taken a lot of money since the look-ahead line, which is around a field goal. The total has come way down. A lot of that had to do with Michigan's performance last week. It was pretty ugly offensively. It was a complete rebuild on the offensive side of the ball. Lost 6 guys up front to the NFL. Lost Blake Corum at running back. Lost some receivers. And then obviously quarterback J.J. McCarthy. Using Alex Orji sometimes, but he can't really throw the ball. Davis Warren didn't really look impressive throwing the ball. The wide receivers couldn't really get separation against Fresno. So the offense obviously looked ugly. The market reacted. The question is, did it react too much? Texas also, on the flip side, had a good performance, exceeded market expectations in a shutout win over Colorado State. Completely shut down that offense in a 52-0 victory. I think the market at 7.5, I can't play Texas. I agreed with the move. I know that you like Michigan. I could see the case at 7.5 here. It's only one data point. Maybe Michigan wasn't showing much on offense. There's been a lot of talk about Texas. I think their secondary looked good last week. They shut down Torrey Horton. I think that a lot of the offseason talk about Texas is they lost Sweat and Murphy, which is important up front. And that was going to be tested in this game. Michigan's going to go run heavy. I assume they want to shorten this game, make it low scoring, make it ugly. And I assume that they're going to blitz a lot. It's Wink Mortendale, but blitz yours into some mistakes. His footwork can kind of get off and potentially have some turnovers. That's really what I think Michigan's path is. But it's not like Texas has me and you out there on the defensive line. They still have guys. I mean, people are acting like the Sweat and Murphy are on there. There's no one there. They're obviously not as good. My question, though, is can the Michigan offensive line really take advantage? It's not like they looked great last week in run blocking. Michigan won that game by 20, but, I mean, Fresno State was on the doorstep down 13 late and then threw a pick six on just a great play by Will Johnson. Michigan still does have a great defense. Will Johnson's one of the better corners in college football, and their defensive line is elite. You like Michigan here. Make your case.
I liked them all summer. I liked them at 3. I would have taken 4 and make this 4. I think 7.5 is a complete overreaction to what happened. I mean, you just look at the scores, and that's the reason people are blowing this up. But I got news for everybody. That game against Colorado State, you can throw it away. It has 0 applicable numbers that you can put in and say, well, this is going to matter against Michigan, except for the fact where the Texas defensive line graded out so poorly against the run, the vaunted Colorado State run. It's hard to believe. So, Michigan doesn't cover against Fresno State. There are some holes in the offensive line. Davis Warren, 15 to 25, all on dink and dunk short passes. He loves Colston Loveland. Who doesn't? That's one of those national title prop bets that I think you and I were writing back in January. So, the offense is going to be in a locker, in a phone booth, whatever you say. It's going to be in a cramped space because it's always inside zone, inside the tackles with Khalil Mullings, and it's always going to be Colston Loveland or somebody passing over the middle and shallow passing, so over the tackle box. And that's exactly where you need to attack this Texas defense. And you lose Sweat.
But isn't Texas just going to completely pack the box here? Like last week, part of it was, and I agree, it's not really applicable. It's going to be a completely different game plan. And obviously Michigan has more talent, but they just dropped everyone against an air raid. Michigan's going to have to complete some passes off of play action because the way to defend this Michigan team, load the box, make sure you have one of your better defenders on Loveland and say, hey, look, we don't think that number one, your quarterbacks can throw it downfield, and number two, your wide receivers can get separation. Like and Edwards, he's not the best, like just down to down efficient running back. I worry about that too.
Oh, no, Donovan Edwards is not the guy you want to ride. Khalil Mullings is from down to down to down. What Donovan Edwards is he just likes to take that inside zone read, and if he can find a crease or maybe find someone running cover 0, he could take off down the field. He's not the guy you're going to run. But he is a little bit of a change of pace, and hopefully he can go for an explosive. I just think Michigan's going to have a lot of success moving the chains here. When you look at Mullings going 4.3 yards after first contact, I know it's Fresno State's D, which isn't bad in Mountain West terms, but it's pretty bad on Big Ten terms. 4.3 yards after first contact shows me that this running back can make something happen after he's touched. Now, whether that's at the line of scrimmage or that's 1 yard in, we'll find out. And yeah, Texas should load the box. I wouldn't be surprised to see them have more than 7 defenders inside the box. But then again, Sharon Moore is going to go 2 tights and maybe the wishbone. I don't know, because it's going to be a nice little chess match between Pete Kwiatkowski and Sharon Moore here. But I have every expectation that Michigan is going to be able to run on the defensive interiors of Bill Norton, Alfred Collins, and Vernon Broughton. They were the 3 worst graded run defenders. That's kind of important when they're your only defensive interior players. Like I said, the trio only created 1 stop, which PFF defines as a complete failure by the offense. Generally, defensive interior, defensive tackles, and nose tackles, they create a lot of stops because it's one-on-one tackling through A gaps. Well, they only created 1 in 27 Colorado State rushing attempts. And I just can't get over the fact that, you're right. Davis Warren is going to have to throw at some point. Or, Alex Orji may come in and run the RPO, and then Davis Warren may need to come in and throw. But I just can't get over that Texas only created 7 pressures and 54 passing attempts by Colorado State. This Colorado State offensive line is not good. It's one of the worst in the Mountain West. And Jay Norvell has been working on it for years. And just a simple 4-man front couldn't get enough push. No sacks, 7 pressures. It just doesn't make sense to me at all, Stuck. And listen, we love our Service Academy offenses. Are we ready to deem Michigan as a Service Academy offense? Because that's exactly what they're going to run here. They're going to try to eat up time of possession. They're going to turn this into a game where a 1 possession is going to mean a lot, which is why I think the 7.5 in the market is really good for Michigan. But you're also 1 drive away from losing here. So I definitely love Michigan to cover the number. I think they can win outright if they are able to have success and get 3.5 yards per run and stay in standard downs just using inside zone. Michigan can win this game.
Yeah, I mean, I make it 6.8. I agreed with the move up, but at over the touchdown, I don't mind the case for Michigan, especially with a low total, how they're going to play this. You just can't fall behind. You can't fall too far behind because then it's lights out for Michigan. But at home, the home crowd pressuring Ewers. If he makes a mistake or two, Michigan will be in this game. But it was the the passing game would just look so inept last week that it's hard for me to get behind them. But the case at 7.5 definitely makes sense to me. I think it's a little bit too much of an overreaction, but definitely an intriguing game and just sums up week 2 in college football. As I mentioned earlier, like how much do you upgrade and downgrade teams based on what you saw? One data point against FCS or lower level FBS teams. It's not an easy endeavor. But let's move on to the second marquee game of the day between Iowa and Iowa State. The battle for the Cy-Hawk Trophy, 3:30 Eastern on CBS. I originally played Iowa State in this game +3. I just simple handicap. I made it less and I said low total, super low total here. I want the field goal in hand. But I ended up coming back some on Iowa after I went back, watched the Iowa State game, and also got some injury reports. The Iowa State linebacker room really worries me. You already had one of your starters out, and then you lost Bacon, who was one of their most important players on defense. And just the drop off to their replacements, it was bad last week, and it could be bad again this week. So I bought some back on Iowa money line. There's also a good chance this game ends by Iowa by 1 or 2 in a typical Iowa State game. The other things that do worry me about Iowa State are, this game usually, low scoring game. A lot of times it's going to come down to just like a special teams play. Who's going to turn the ball over? Penalties. Those are the battles that Iowa usually wins. And you have to mention that this Iowa team showed a little bit more of a pulse last week on offense. I think they had the most total yards since 2019. That true freshman wide receiver, Vanderzee, he showed out with 2 touchdowns. Their wide receivers had 3 touchdowns, the same amount of touchdowns they had all of last season. So you saw them spread it out a little more, use a little more modern concepts, and it's a little more vertical offense. I feel like you talking about San Diego State calling the Iowa offense vertical. So if you look back at this, and then but I should finish the other thing that worries me about Iowa State is their offense last year worked best when it hit explosive plays. Very explosive offense. Well, under Phil Parker, no defense has done a better job at limiting explosive plays than Iowa has in recent seasons. So I don't feel as good about Iowa State with some of the injury situations. I don't know if they're going to be able to efficiently move the ball. And maybe this Iowa offense has a little more juice. I will say I'll make a case for, I already made a case. I'm going to make a case later in the show for an ugly over. This one I would lean over under 37. The under in this matchup is 17-2 over the past 19 meetings, but 10 of those 19 have reached at least 37 points. And this looks like a much more competent Iowa offense. There's injuries on the Iowa State defense. So I think that there could be more points than many are expected. And it's not that high of a bar to clear at under 37. 20-17 gets it done. What do you see here?
I'm going to download every word you just said and apply it to Army Navy when the total's like 28, because it's too low. Sometimes it just gets too low and you got to go over. So listen, I'm not surprised by what Iowa State did last week against North Dakota. I mean, it's just in their DNA to suck in the first game of the season. They won by 6 as a 32.5-point favorite over Northern Illinois in 2021. They lost outright to Louisiana in 2020 in the opener. They beat Northern Iowa by 3 in 2019 as a 23-point favorite. I really don't take anything away from it, but the injuries are a concern. You're right about that. Freshman Cale Brzezinha is going to start at linebacker as a freshman. He was injured last week, but he comes back in the rotation, a linebacker crew that's already missing 2 guys. So if there's going to be a point of attack for Iowa's new offense, it's going to be at that linebacker area. So, I'm not sold on Iowa like everybody else is. I know the final score says 40-0. It was 6-0 at half. Then they come back out. They're busting some highlight touchdowns. They're running through the A gap and, a 60-yard TD to the house. I mean, that's just Illinois State being tired in the second half. That I'm not really sure that has to do with Tim Lester's offense hitting the A gap and going 60 yards. Cade McNamara throwing for 3 TDs is a very positive sign for the Hawkeyes. To me, this play is all about who takes care of the ball better. So instead of breaking down offense and defense in this matchup, you're actually breaking down special teams here. Now, Rocco Becht has only thrown 3 interceptions in his last 9 games. He has been fantastic with the ball. He's only fumbled twice on 61 carries last year. The explosive element does reside with Iowa State, but you're right. Phil Parker is going to throw a little bit of a kink into that. Eli Green, Jaden Higgins were well over 2 yards per route run in the game against North Dakota. Jalen Noel went berserk. I mean, all eight targets he caught for 135 yards and a TD. The Iowa defensive backs, they're going to have to be on their game in one-on-one tackling. I don't really know if that's where Iowa State's going to go. I think it's really Abu Sama. I mean, he only fumbled the ball twice last year. And when you hear me bring up fumbles and interception rates, I want to know who's more probable to having the screw up that's going to cost the game. I think of Brock Purdy fumbling the ball down in Iowa's red zone. That was the game. You go into the special teams here. Jalen Noel, he returns punts, kicks. That's a big plus for Iowa State. Iowa State's punter, Tyler Perkins, he averaged 44 yards last season, so it's not like we have an inexperienced punter. They do have a red shirt freshman kicker, Kyle Cornradi. He was 3 for 3 on extra points, but no field goal attempts. Unsurprisingly, Iowa gained 195 hidden yards last week on Illinois State. They connected on 2 field goals. They connected on all 4 extra points. Only 1 punt on the day. Good returns. So really, if you're backing Iowa State, you think it's a pick'em game, because I think it's a pick'em game. You're backing Iowa State because you want the points, you want the field goal, and you're trusting Rocco Becht to not have mistakes here because he made a lot against the Hawkeyes last year. It was just deer in the headlights, but then again, second game for a true freshman. I trust him more than I do Cade McNamara to create chunk plays, bigger chunk plays. I just can't get over Iowa not even scoring a TD on Illinois State through the first half. So, I'm backing Iowa State here at 3. Pretty confident with it, but I think the game's going to land 1, 2, 3. So like the number.
Yeah, it is worth mentioning Caleb Johnson was suspended in the first half. He did come out in that second half, look great. And, you mentioned Illinois State might have been wearing down. He was fresh and ready to go, motivated after that suspension. And maybe Carrick Ferentz back on the sidelines. Maybe he says, no. We're back to no passing. We're going completely conservative. All right, let's go to our third marquee matchup of the day between Tennessee and NC State in prime time. This game will be played in Charlotte. I'm guessing 50-50 split in the crowd. It's like 3.5, 4 hours from Knoxville, couple hours from Raleigh. A lot of NC State alum in Charlotte. Tennessee fans will travel well here. I think it'll be pretty close to split. Be a pretty cool atmosphere. We completely disagree on this game. I will say I completely read the market wrong. So this look ahead line, which I made it around 4 before last weekend. NC State looked bad. Tennessee looked great. They were both against FCS opponents. I said to myself, I just went over a touchdown, and I got a +7.5 -105. You can get much better than that now, and that's all I wanted because I just didn't react as much as the market apparently did. Now, Nico, the Tennessee star quarterback, looked great, and there's a chance that I'm underrating him and have not upgraded Tennessee enough and this offense. There's definitely a chance of that, and there's definitely a chance that NC State's has more issues than I'm assuming. But I will say, in their defense, one of the reasons why I didn't downgrade NC State as much as others is and it's worth mentioning, should say this, Josh Heupel, first half, he is the most profitable coach against the spread in the first half among all college football coaches. But NC State last week, look, it was rough, but you have brand new quarterback, some new pieces, you have a new center, some new pieces at the skill positions. So there's going to be some growing pains. I also think they weren't showing much. McCall missed some throws. And so I think it'll be better here. I think that you can use his legs. And Tennessee's secondary is still a very, very weak area. Now, the question is, can the offensive line get any push? Can the RPO game work to get to downs where it's manageable to throw the ball, to make Tennessee respect the run? Because that Tennessee secondary, I haven't seen it tested yet. and it'll get a much better test this weekend. They've lost 3 guys to the NFL and 3 guys to Power 4 teams. That is the glaring weakness on this team. The NC State defense was a concern last week. They're still going to be without a very good safety, but if you go back and you watch that game, Peyton Wilson is a huge loss, one of the most important positions on the NC State defense. But his replacement, the first play of the game, by the way, he dropped a pick 6. And then on that first drive, he got thrown out for targeting. And his replacement was horrendous. Blown assignments, missed tackles, and it led to a lot of yards for Western Carolina. Well, he's obviously back. Still haven't seen that big of a drop-off, but the drop-off to his backup from Peyton Wilson was glaring, jumped off the page. Also without their nickel, arguably the second most important position in Tony Gibson's defense. He should be back this week. Really critical piece in how Gibson uses the nickel. So they were without a couple starters. They have Aiden White's really, really good corner on the outside. So you have him, and this is still a very confusing, complicated defense for a young quarterback to prepare for. So it's a chance Nico makes a couple key mistakes, which could flip this game. I know that he fared well against Iowa, which and Iowa was a really good defense in the bowl. I know it was a bowl game, but still. So maybe he's just that good. But all I wanted was over a touchdown. I expect McCall to be better. McCall really does. He takes care of the ball. And last week, like, NC State dropped a couple picks. They missed a couple wide open throws. They had a couple starters out on defense. So I don't think it was bad. And they weren't, I don't think it was as bad as some people think. And I didn't downgrade them much. I don't think they were showing much. McCall's legs will be big here. I think that Tennessee secondary is vulnerable. But definitely a bit scared of how Tennessee looked last week. I just misjudged the market. I should have waited, could have got a 10. And I've talked to a couple odds makers and people who have books who said every single bet in the world is coming in on Tennessee. So I probably should have anticipated that. There's obviously some sharper money on Tennessee too that has moved the line up. So I mistimed the market here, but I just wanted over 7. But you love Tennessee.
Absolutely love Tennessee. Got a
Head-to-head.
7. Yeah, head to head. I got the 7.5 on Wednesday because I knew moves were coming tonight. When I say tonight, Thursday. Generally, not that I respect any of them, but there are service plays from places that can move lines. And those generally come in Thursday night and on Fridays. So if you're looking to get ahead of a number, that's Thursday afternoon is pretty much your deadline. Kind of like totals. They get whacked by Tuesday morning and you're just stuck with, the remains. I think Tennessee is going to roll here. Absolutely going to roll because all of the players that you just mentioned from, suspensions, from people hurt, none of those are on the defensive line and none of them are on the offensive line. And that is where the root core issues are with NC State. Western Carolina was leading entering the fourth quarter for a reason. They were above national average in success rate on offense. They were creating methodical drives. That's a drive with at least 10 plays, 50 yards, over 3 minutes. They were creating explosive drives. That's a drive that averages more than 10 yards per play. That shouldn't happen against Tony Gibson's defense. So there are some serious problems. I mean, probably an identity problem losing Peyton Wilson. There's some problems on the defensive line because they couldn't stop anybody. 42 snaps in standard downs versus 17 in passing downs for Western Carolina. That's a problem. And nobody saw Western Carolina performing that well. It's not like they're one of the upper tier teams in FCS. So, we'll see how the defense works itself out. I think the one thing that I don't like is Tony Gibson plays cover 1 and cover 0. You can't go cover 0 against Tennessee's defense. You can ask Georgia.
Offense.
I'm sorry. You can't go cover 1 and cover 0, especially cover 0 against Tennessee's offense. Not the way that Heupel stretches the field. You have to commit defenders on the outside. You just can't drop a safety and a full blitz over the middle. And if you do, Nico is picking up reads like there's no tomorrow. Dante Thornton is electric. Brew McCoy is finally putting up numbers in yards per route run. He was always sub 2. He's finally starting to look the part here. That's not to say that NC State can't create explosives also, but there is nothing on the NC State defense that tells me there's going to be any resistance into getting to Nico, getting him to change, or able to stop these timing routes when Heupel's stretch expands the field, gets those wide receivers out in space. So I think Tennessee is going to be able to score continuously. Now, when you go to the other side of the ball, Grayson McCall is not protected. I love him. I mean, but he saw 9 pressures. His blindside tackle, Anthony Belton, allowed 2 of them. And James Pierce is going to line right up over that. That's not a good combination at all. That's a huge Tennessee bullet point on why you would want to take them. I agree with you on the depth chart for the secondary. It's horrific. They lost everybody in the 2 deep depth chart. The Volunteers did. They've got to replace that. Chattanooga couldn't expose that. They couldn't show any of that. I do expect Casey Concepcion to have explosives like he did in the 4th quarter, but there are other.
Look out for Justin Jolly too, the tight end for that transfer from UConn. He's a good player who could play in the NFL. He had a huge day last week, and he had I think a huge touchdown call back on a penalty.
Yeah, I haven't touched the total. I would take an over. I mean, I would take it over because I think NC State can provide their share of explosive plays, especially when they're busted because the offensive line couldn't protect Grayson McCall whatsoever. And Grayson McCall is very good with the ball, but 9 pressures from an FCS team was a little unexpected. So I do expect NC State to get theirs. I just don't expect Tennessee to be stopped here. And as long as they avoid Aiden White, he had 2 PBUs over at corner. He did allow 5 of 11 targets to get caught, but still, I mean, that's a pretty good forced incompletion rate. As long as they avoid him at corner, I don't know who he's going to get assigned to, if he's just going to play on island or play one guy, but the rest of the receivers at Tennessee are just fine in creating explosives, and that's what's going to happen here.
All right, let's go on to our final marquee game between Colorado and Nebraska. Nebraska, 7.5 point favorite at home, looking for revenge from last year. The good news is they will have a quarterback who won't just completely vomit the game away. Dominic Raiola looked very good. I was pretty impressed in his debut, although again, it was against UTEP. Regardless, the quarterback position will be significantly upgraded to what Nebraska rolled out there last year in Boulder. Running backs look pretty good. This is an improved Nebraska offense. The defensive front is very good. So I think this Nebraska team's better. You expected that with Matt Rule in another season of development. Colorado, meanwhile, looks like the same team. They are struggles on defense. They just couldn't cover basic concepts and adjust to what North Dakota State was doing. And there's no run game still. The offensive line still had issues, but they just have an electric passing attack that's going to get points. When you have Shedeur Sanders at quarterback, and you have Travis Hunter, and you add Wester, Horn, who was their leading receiver. I mean, it's an amazing wide receiver room with a very talented quarterback. They're going to hit their fair share of explosive plays. This probably comes down to how often Nebraska wins the battle up front and how often they can get to Sanders on 3rd downs and get sacks on him, or is Sanders able to elude them, get enough protection, and hit the explosives downfield. I don't have much on this game. I'll be rooting for Nebraska to win, for Colorado win total under. And if you look back, since Deion has been at Colorado, 13 games, underdogs have gone 10-3 in their games. They're not a great favorite because their D stinks. They can't run it. And they're a pretty good underdog because they can put up points. And on top of that, if you look back last year at some of their scores and some of the times they did cover as underdog, they didn't deserve to cover, but they came back late. They would just add on touchdowns late because they had that explosive passing offense. And we saw last week, Deion's not going to stop. Doesn't matter if he has an opportunity to take knees, he's still going to throw it. So back door could be wide open here too for Colorado, especially if you can get over 7. So nothing strong here for me. I think you like Colorado. You're going with the dog trend in Colorado games.
I do. It's one of those things where it's like I want to put money down on it, and I'm like, do you really want to do this with Colorado? There's an emotional, social acceptance of betting Colorado for me. No, I'm on Colorado plus 7.5. I think the handicap, it seems like the handicap of Colorado, we've just been so spot on with it since Deion took over. You're right. The question is, can you flush Shedeur out of the pocket, and can your secondary maintain those cover assignments on Jimmy Horn, Travis Hunter, and LeJontay Wester? Well, let's go look at UTEP, who is actually Austin P dressed up in UTEP clothes. UTEP produced 2 explosive passes on 27 attempts. Austin P transfer Skylar Locklear finished the game from UTEP. He saw 4 pressures and 18 dropbacks, and he recorded a big-time throw and 2 turnover-worthy plays with an ADOT of 10.5. So a little bit of success from an Austin P offense playing in UTEP clothes and creating big-time throws in having explosive passes and avoiding some pressure here. Now, Nebraska did get an interception at the end of the first half. It was at garbage time. It was already 40-7. They had one early at the end of the second quarter. But the real story here for me is that there were 0 pass breakups against UTEP. How is that possible? How is your secondary not recording a single PBU against what is an FCS transfer team? The secondary projects to be in the bottom half of the Big Ten when you talk about Nebraska. 3 new starters, only strong safety Malcolm Hartzog is the one with experience there. That is definitely a place to attack Nebraska, and that is definitely where Colorado is going to go. I think they can flush Shedeur out of the pocket. I don't think the secondary can maintain their assignments. And when Travis Hunter and LaJonte, when they all want to come back to the ball and come back to Shedeur, it's going to create big plays. You go to the other side of the ball, Colorado's defense got better on the defensive line. They created 7 tackles for loss against North Dakota State. They also created 14 pressures. That is something that we didn't see out of the Colorado defensive line last year. The fact that they can create pressures is a really bad note for Nebraska and their offensive line, because Dylan Raiola saw 7 pressures from the UTEP defensive line last week. I just can't. What's going on with this Nebraska offensive line? They had severe issues in turning methodical drives into points. They had a ton of long drives. They averaged 3.4 points every time they crossed the 40-yard line. That's not even national average, not close. I think the one thing that interests me, Stuck, I don't think it's applicable here this week, but something to keep an eye on. Nebraska had 40 minutes of possession. They had 100 plays. They averaged 23.12 seconds per play. That's extremely fast. That's like a top 30 pace. So I'm going to keep an eye on Nebraska and how fast they're snapping the ball, but I'm not going to touch the total. Anyways, with Nebraska, it's a lumbering, heavy offense, 1 explosive drive, 2 passes completed over 20 yards, just one run over 20 yards. It's not an offense that I think that can take over a game, pound them into submission like a service academy, like we talked about Michigan. This is a Nebraska offense that could get down the field, but they just couldn't convert it into points. You go to the flip side, Shedeur is going to be able to hit a bunch of targets where Nebraska will lose their coverage assignments. So I like Colorado here plus 7.5. I think they got a shot to win, but definitely just taking the points at this point.
All right, good stuff there. Let's move on to the rundown, and we're gonna hit let's hit like about 6 games or so. Starting Kansas State at Tulane. I like the under here. Still don't trust Avery Johnson as a passer. Noon start here. Summerall will have that defense ready. I think Kansas State not going to go fast. Lean on their run game. I think that's the strength of this Tulane defense up front. Very good linebackers. Very young, inexperienced starting quarterback for Tulane. I think they're going to rely on Hughes in their run game. So I like the under here at the noon start in Tulane. Anything there?
High chance of rain, 10-mile-an-hour winds. There's going to be a lot of running in this game. That's why you've seen this total open at 50, down to 47.5. I think it's worth noting that Chris Kleiman was 0-3 against the spread as a road favorite last year. Just not something that really suits them, as good as they've been since he got there as head coach. But Kansas State was just monsters on the ground last week against UT Martin. 283 yards on the ground. They blocked a punt. They allowed just 134 yards on defense. Like, Kansas State is firing on all cylinders against the Skyhawks. And Tulane had a lot of questions with Troy's coach, John Summerall, coming in here. The defense shut out Southeastern Louisiana 52-0 was the final score. That's pretty impressive considering there was only 8 offensive drives for Tulane and scoring 52 points. I guess the question is, can the Tulane D slow down Avery Johnson, DJ Giddens, Dylan Edwards? Tulane returns as a top 3 defensive front in the AAC, 7 starters back on defense, and they were 25th in rushing success rate last year. A lot of those players, some have left, but they do have 7 returning starters. I agree with you. It's going to be a ground game on both sides. I think the defense is the best part of Tulane. Kansas State's ground game is going to be where it's at. And I think with weather involved, the under is the only way to play here. If the number dips a little bit lower, I would be interested in Kansas State, but probably not going to end up playing that. But I do like the under.
Tulane, for what it's worth, has been dominant against the spread at home over the past 7 or 8 years. There's some voodoo down there. But let's.
There actually is. There actually is in New Orleans. Yeah, so in New Orleans.
Actually, that voodoo is driving over there to Ullman. But let's move on to another game. Here's another game we disagree on. Disagreement week 2. Georgia Tech, Syracuse. I took the 3. with Syracuse. I need 3, which you can get as of the time we're recording. Syracuse, look, their run D was bad last week. They couldn't set the edge. It's very worrisome. They don't. The Marlowe Wax, they lose their star linebacker against this Georgia Tech rush attack. But I had to take the 3 based on my numbers, and it's a good situation. Syracuse, second straight home game. They're back home to start the year. Georgia Tech has gone from Ireland to Atlanta, now to Central New York, their third game. That's a lot of traveling. And by the way, they got a bump originally for that Florida State win. I mean, was it really even that impressive after what we saw from Florida State against Boston College? So maybe Georgia, that effort wasn't as great as it may have looked. And then last week against Georgia State, I can tell you it was painful. Painful loss there. Georgia State should have covered that game. They were inside the 10 3 times on 3 separate drives and came away with 3 total points. They had first and goal at the 1 on the first drive of the game. Didn't score. First and goal and then they fumbled at their own 10. Georgia Tech scored a touchdown. Then they had first and goal inside the 10, settle for a field goal. Even had first and goal in garbage time and couldn't, and turned it over on downs. Georgia Tech's 2 touchdowns came on 4th downs as well. Just a brutal game. Should not have been a 22-point margin. So I expect Syracuse to clean some of the stuff up defensively. It's a new scheme, a lot of new players. But I just had to take the 3 here with the home pup. I think Georgia Tech, I don't think has been as impressive as some may think. They're now ranked, but that Florida State win looks much worse now. And I watched that every play of that Georgia State game. Georgia State could have easily been in that game, but you like the ramble and wreck here going on the road.
I do, and most of it was because of a terrible advanced analytics that I saw in the Syracuse box score from week 1. I can tell you right now,
Tyus ran for over 200 on only 16 carries, so that's troubling.
Yeah. Like, am I buying Ohio futures in the MAC now? It's crazy. I can tell you the market loves Syracuse here. It looks like if you have Georgia Tech, you're on the wrong side. But at the same time, what was that West Virginia team last week? But I'm not surprised to see the total tick up. Syracuse passing offense under McCord, they were rolling against Ohio. Trevor Pena, Zeke Haynes caught 10 passes for 150 combined. Aronde Gadsden's just a beast at tight end. That 4.25 of Tyler Santucci's not really seen exactly what's coming down the pipe with this kind of tight end. They didn't see it against Georgia State. They didn't see it against Florida State. So that's a bit of, an issue for them for Georgia Tech to worry about. Kyle McCord's box score was really not as clean. 3 big time throws that matches his touchdowns, but 2 turnover worthy plays. He did make some mistakes. Ohio recorded 10 defensive pressures on this Syracuse offensive line. Georgia Tech's had 19 pressures through 2 games on Georgia State and FSU. So I expect them to get pressure on McCord here. We'll see if McCord commits another pair of turnover worthy plays or more. And then the question on the Syracuse side for defense is, can you stop Haynes King? Can you stop Jamal Haynes? Just the ground assault that these guys are. If Ohio is going to run for 255 and 203 behind running back Anthony Tyus, that is a severe problem in stopping Georgia Tech. May have you look into the over a little bit. I think that's why it started at 59. It's at 61.5. Jamal Haynes has not shown the juice that we expect from him. Excuse me. So far, 3.5 yards after contact. I think that was up in the 4s last year. We'll see if he can improve on that. But I do like the over. I took a Georgia Tech money line. I think if you can get it cheap, I would support that side just because I can't get over Ohio creating 10 defensive pressures on the Syracuse offensive line, and I cannot get over them having a running back that went over 200 yards. This Ohio team was supposed to be left for dead, like demoted to FCS. Not a good start for Syracuse from the box score.
Should be an interesting game early on Saturday. Baylor, Utah, pretty interesting game. Utah laying a little, looks like 14.5 right now. On the surface, from a numbers perspective, would lean Baylor there. Can't really take too much away from their game against Tarleton. I think Tarleton was starting Daniel Greek, their backup quarterback, it was bad. And Baylor won 45-3. I can't trust Daquan Finn though here. That's the thing.
Right.
I watched him in the match. He's going to make mistakes. He even threw 2 picks against Tarleton. It's not accurate enough. I don't trust Baylor to be able to run the ball on this Utah front. It's going to come down to Finn. Maybe he can make some plays with his legs, but I don't trust him not to make mistakes, and that's what could be the difference here. Anything?
Well, first off, this isn't a conference game. This was scheduled before before the Big 12 expanded. So does Kyle Whittingham feel the need to put his foot down on the pedal. Like if there's a backdoor opportunity here and you're up by 21, got to think about that aspect. But who's shaping this number? Like every time it gets to 14, it does a little bounce. I think you're getting some major resistance at 14 where people want Utah. So it's kind of hanging out at 14 and a half everywhere. I project this at 17 and a half. I think SP Plus has it 15 and a half. So it's really floating around in all these numbers. But I just cannot get off DeQuan Finn. One big time throw, 3 turnover worthy plays against Tarleton. And oh, by the way, I mean, we talked about it all summer. Baylor, you're not going to save Dave Aranda's job with DeQuan Finn at quarterback. And you go and look and see what he saw 11 pressures on 24 dropbacks. Almost half of the dropbacks, the Baylor offensive line allowed DeQuan Finn to get pressure. That's a really bad scenario going up against Utah's defense. Oh, by the way, DeQuan Finn, who's fumbled as many times as Cam Ward, he had a fumble on 5 rushing attempts last week. The guy is just a walking turnover machine. I don't know who's betting Baylor. If they cover the game, great. Maybe it's because Whittingham let them. But at 14, you see the sink and hit 14. If it flickers at 14, I think that's the point where you'd have to buy Utah. I'm probably going to pass.
Yeah, Cam Rising looked great in his opener, albeit against Southern Utah in a 49-0 victory. South Carolina, Kentucky, here in Lexington, you'll have your best bet on this game. I will say, I was thinking about buying South Carolina at 10 or more, thinking this might be a bit of an overreaction, but I talked about this in the preseason. South Carolina, this game, like they need to run the ball, and you can't run the ball in Kentucky. You need to throw on this Kentucky team to move the ball against them. And from what I saw last week, I know that there were some drops. Sellers missed some throws. I'm not sure if South Carolina do that. I had under 45.5 up on I was about to bet it, and it got whacked. But I was a little concerned because Kentucky did show at times last week that they would run more tempo. They averaged a FBS low 55 plays last year. They want to get that up to 75. It was a mixed bag of tempo. Sometimes they were slow. The helmet communication thing is interesting. I don't think it's going to have that much of an impact on tempo overall, but there's going to be spots. This isn't necessarily that pertinent to a specific game, but there's going to be spots where it means a lot more than others. And when I'm talking huge games in loud environments, right? And teams that are very reliant on the helmet communication, that's where you could see pace really slow down. And then you also got to remember teams are going to adjust to it. Quarterbacks are going to adjust to, so they might become more efficient with it over time. Something to monitor, but I don't think it's having, broadly speaking, a huge impact on pace so far. But in specific spots, might be something worth considering. So, Kentucky might go. Just they're getting used to going much more up tempo. Might be a thing here. So I would lean South Carolina just based on numbers and overreacting, but it's just not a good matchup. You'll have more on this on a team total for your best bet. Did you want to add anything before we get to that?
No, I just think it is impressive that South Carolina was able to create 2 methodical drives. They had a 7-minute, 13-play drive, but it ended up in a field goal. Later on, they had an 8-minute drive of 16 plays. It ended up in a field goal. And I'm not really sure how they're going to have that success against the Kentucky defense. I mean, Southern Miss was held scoreless. They only had 7 first downs. They averaged less than a half a yard per rushing attempt. 2 INTs off Tate Rodemaker. It seems like the Kentucky defense is firing on all cylinders right out of the gate. Just not sure South
Great
Carolina.
linebackers, good defensive line. They prevent explosives on the back end. The way you got to beat them is with an efficient passing attack.
Which they don't have with the RPO.
South Carolina doesn't have that.
Lenora Sellers is not going to be allowed to throw. Rocket Sanders is his RPO man. They just, unless they go to another quarterback, they're not going to have, the Gamecocks are just not going to have a way to pass. What they do on offense is exactly what Kentucky's defense eats for breakfast. So
yeah,
bad matchup.
Yeah, the reason I would still like the under is that it's a bad matchup with the South Carolina offense. The South Carolina defense, I think is going to be better this season, especially up front. And there also is this, I talked about the tempo with Kentucky and, new offensive coordinator. And maybe they hold some things back, especially if they're up, because they know their defense can win this game, because guess who's coming to town next week is Georgia. So it might suppress scoring late, and Kentucky might not go as fast as maybe they want to as the season progresses. I think depends on what other games are on at that time. I think I might be going to that game this week.
This has 17-7 written all over it.
Yeah. Houston at Oklahoma. Oklahoma's taken some money since open. Houston looked horrendous last week against UNLV at home. complete rebuild there. Anything here?
Over for me. I know it's sinking down. But I think Oklahoma's team total, Venables is going to continue to score as much as he is, and Houston's defense is not prepared to stop anybody right now. Looks like the weather is clear, about 10-mile-an-hour winds blowing through one end zone. I do like Oklahoma to go over their team total here. Houston's not going to be able to keep up. So see some 27.5s in the market. There is some love out there for Houston, but they're going to have to create methodical drives and burn some clock, and I just don't think that's going to happen. So I do like the OU going over their team total.
Curious to see if there's things keep going south. There ends up being a quarterback change in Houston, but that's a conversation for another day. Kansas at Illinois. Illinois looked pretty good last week, but not sure how much you could take against Eastern Illinois. Kansas played Lindenwood. Do you have anything here against your old friend Burt?
Yeah, well, I know Kansas can't go over the total because they decided in Children's Mercy Stadium, soccer stadium in Kansas City, that they would just lay off the points against Lindenwood. So kind of ruined me there. I think Illinois is going to be able to compete here. I think they're thick enough in the trench that they're going to be able to do some damage here and limit Kansas in the scoring. It wasn't a clean box score out of Kansas whatsoever. They struggled for a couple quarters. So I would be enticed to take a 5, but I haven't touched it.
All right, let's move on to our first FCS or no segment of the real 2024 college football season. I'm going to bring up a spot I've circled. No lines out for some of these yet. Duquesne, baby. The Dukes. The Dukes of Duquesne against Boston College. Boston College, sort of like a service academy in the way that they play. So they don't profile as a great large favorite. But this spot, BC beats Florida State on a Monday night. Huge upset. They don't get back. They take a day off. Bill O'Brien gave the day out. They don't even start practicing on Wednesday. Guess where do they go next week? At Missouri. And you think they're game planning for Duquesne or care about this game or want to run it up? Duquesne, meanwhile, they played like last Thursday. They got like 4 or 5 extra days of BC doesn't profile as a big favorite. This is a great spot. Duquesne is on my radar for when that line comes out.
That's a great call out. The Sacramento State, Fresno State one. I think Sacramento State first half is a great bet. And the reason is because Fresno State had an entire game plan for Michigan, slow, grinding, rush offense. That's not what you're getting with Sacramento State. The team that is expected to make the quarterfinals, maybe the semifinals of the FCS playoffs, return almost everybody on offense, and they're heavy in the pass with 3 pass catchers that are some of the best in FCS.
You're going back to your Hornets?
Well, in the first half, I will, because it's such a change of pace for Fresno to go from Michigan to Sacramento State. There's no lines on the board as Stuckey and I are recording this. It's a projection I make with my FCS numbers at about 18 in favor of Fresno State. So I would expect to see 10 in the first half when it pops, but I think Sacramento State's in a good spot here.
Well, you're going back to Sac State after they burn you. The people are dying to know, are you done betting on DJU as a favorite this season?
Florida State's done. I've already lost 2 units in the app. I've lost more money than I want to count. Man, I'm done with Florida State. I can't even believe they're in that bracket. We need to tear that up and create a new one for CW because
I'm so happy I didn't put Florida
State.
State in my bracket. This is not a DJU podcast.
Did you see the Miami? I went and grabbed some Miami plus 180 for the ACC. I think if you got your Clemson bet, we got our Clemson bets. That's the final, right? I mean, Miami looks so buttoned up and clean, which is weird with Cristobal and Cam Ward for us to say that, but there's no havoc defenses that are going to finish in the top 50 on this schedule. Miami, man, I know we're going to talk about it on the pod. We don't have their game, but I have to say, holy cow, just keep going back through that box score. They look legit.
Yeah, I joined you with some Sam Houston State features as well. All right, before we get to some trash, quick reminder, make sure you check out the Group of 5 guys in their breakdown each and every week. Do a great job. I think they hit their moneyline underdog parlay last week. So give them some love as well. And quick contest reminder. Quick contest reminder. Last year, our friends over at the Favorites ran a free NFL Pick'em contest and gave away over $100,000 in cash prizes. And they just announced they're bringing it back for this NFL season. So if you want a chance at their $40,000 first place prize and over $100,000 in total cash prizes this season, go to favorites.actionnetwork.com to sign up now. That's favorites.actionnetwork.com. It's just 5 picks against the spread every week with a $40,000 first place prize, plus thousands more up for grabs every week, all free. Just go to favorites.actionnetwork.com now, sign up and make your week 1 picks today. And it's open up until week 2. Even if you don't win the grand prize, you have chances to win each and every week. All right, it's that time for some trash. The trash man is here. We're going extra ugly. Extra ugly. All right, let's go through these quick. And then you just say if you agree or not. Not Utah State over 4 touchdowns against USC. USC, short week here off an emotional win against LSU. I mean, Riley, look, Mr. Miller Moss, him or Moss, so I call him. He even said after the game, we emptied our tank here. They got a bye on deck in Michigan. Yeah. I don't think that they really want to show much here. Not even sure he's going to start a quarterback for Utah State. It could be Bryson Barnes, remember from Utah, or Spencer Petras, who got hurt last week. Utah State even lost a running back, but to injury. But all I wanted was over 4 touchdowns. Is a great spot. We're backing the Aggies. Lincoln Riley, the least profitable coach in college football, as a favorite of over 21 points. Agree or disagree?
Completely agree, and I like the over here. Just what's in front of USC between a bye and Michigan. Utah State is not a bad Mountain West team, even with the change at head coach with Nate Drilling stepping in. They're going to be what they were before. There's no drop off there. I project this game at 25. I'm with you, and I actually like the over a lot here too.
I've got this is the disagree pod. At 31, I'm going USF. It's the same number as Western Kentucky. Western Kentucky stinks. USF's defense stinks, but it's better than Western Kentucky's. And Finley was awful last week. Just awful. He just missed so many throws. That game should have been more competitive. USF has a better offense, a better quarterback, and a better defense than Western Kentucky. And I'm getting the same number. Bama still has questions in the secondary, still has questions in the offensive line. I know DeBoer always covers, but we're going Bulls at 31.
Yeah, I'm not flying in the face of DeBoer. Plus, if you're asking an Alabama defense on how to defend a head coach that comes straight out of Tennessee and that stretch spread, they're going to know how to do it. So I'm going to stick tight. I see the market movement going against the 31 I took on Alabama at the 30.5. I'm going to hold tight here. I'm going to hold with the Crimson Tide.
Akron, baby. Zips catching over 3 touchdowns against Rutgers. Rutgers doesn't have a quarterback. This total is under 40, and you're going to give me over 3 touchdowns. Akron's defense super underrated. Last week, they were still able to cover against Ohio State, even though they had a ton of turnovers. They got 2 defensive touchdowns. That defense is underrated. Rutgers just don't have a quarterback. This is like a service academy game. You're going to give me over 3 touchdowns with Akron. Joe Moorhead can draw up a couple plays here to get them to 10 points, which is, I think, probably all they'll need. Give me the Zips.
I'm not joining you, but this is an under game all the way. I don't care that it's out at 39, but I'm telling you, if Akron covers here, Stuck, I might force you to rewrite the MAC manifesto 2 weeks into the season, because Ohio and Akron covering games and looking good. What is going on in the MAC?
I did talk about the Akron defense. It's yes. Underrated, and they can slow down the Rutgers vaunted rushing attack. Let's go. It's just going to keep getting uglier and uglier. Let's go Temple. I start with Akron, it just gets uglier. Temple at Navy. It's a service academy laying double digits. Yes, Temple looked awful last week, and they do stink, yes, but they get an extra day of prep. They already saw Navy last year and beat them. I think their defensive changes actually are more conducive to stopping the triple option. Navy tweaked their offense a bit, but still very slow, laying double digits. And I'm going to wait to see if I can get a 14. But Temple last week, yes, they looked horrendous, but they played Oklahoma. They had 6 turnovers. There's got to be some turnovers are coming for Temple eventually. Just natural regression. They lost 6 turnovers last week. Over the last 15 games, they've only forced 5. They had 1 more turnover last week than they forced over the past 15 games. This is a team that's more in their weight class. Service Academy laying double digits. Give me Temple.
959 bad beat is the call to the hotline number for voicemails. If this doesn't cover for Temple, call in and boo this man. That is Temple. We can't do that. What was the final score of you? Oh my God, Oklahoma
Let's say fumbled every play. All right, and then we're gonna get it somehow getting even uglier. We're going UMass, baby. You're off the bandwagon. I'm on it now. I told you last week, get off it. They were awful on special teams. They had all kinds of penalties. They lost by 2 touchdowns. It really was actually closer than that. Their offensive line was a mess. I get it. Everything was a mess. But Toledo, I watched some of that game. They have issues. They have issues in the offensive line. Their secondary is questionable to me. They played my beloved Dukes, but there was some issues there. I can't get to this number. Anything over 17, UMass. I want 21, but it's not coming. It was got up to like 20 and came back down. I know you're off this, so you don't have to say anything.
May God be with you.
There you have it, the trash. Utah State USF, Akron, Temple, and UMass. Pray for me.
Utah State, baby. Let's go.
Oh, man. Yeah, Utah State, USF, Akron, Temple, UMass, and Duquesne. I'm going to have a miserable, miserable Saturday. I already hated this card, and now I'm going to add 6 trash picks. All right. That'll end the trash segment. Now we're moving on to our newest segment this year, an old but new segment, what we call it. It's called Nowhere Fast. San Diego State. They somehow went over last week. It was 6-3 at the half, and it somehow went over. They host Oregon State. Over or under?
It's an under this week. I hate it. For us to take these overs of San Diego State, you have to have a dance partner. Let's look at Oregon State.
This is going to be a run-heavy game.
Let's look at Oregon State's box score. 37 minutes, 29 seconds, time of possession, 72 plays. That comes out to 31.2 seconds per play. If those of you that don't know those numbers off the top of your head, that might be dead last in FBS football. Maybe the slowest. I'll know next week. Tempo becomes a big deal next week when I get 2 data points. There's no way I'm taking it over with Oregon State. Not at 31.2 seconds per play.
Yeah, I would lean under here as well. I think a lot of running in this game. Clock should be moving.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Speaking of tempo, we might see a lot of tempo in this one. Arkansas will head to Stillwater to take on Oklahoma State in a head-to-head battle between Colin and Brett McMurphy. Look forward to the live show on Saturday for them to battle. I'm going to come up with a little wager for them in that game. Arkansas 7.5-point underdog here. So it's time to get Colin's thoughts on Arkansas football.
Yeah.
Clip. Colin, how much do you take from Arkansas? I know you're very tuned in with this program from their win last week. How much does it translate to this week? I think I think from what I saw on the app, you're against your pokes here. I think you also like the over, so you are expecting tempo. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I am on the over, and I took Oklahoma State, which I did not think I would be, especially when you've banned me from finishing drives because Arkansas had 10 possessions and 10 touchdowns. The numbers are going to be a little inflated, but you got to throw that out. And I think the one thing that I did look is I was not impressed with the offensive line and what they did in pass blocking. The good news is Bobby Petrino's offense is there. They are connecting everywhere. Arkansas should get Andrew Armstrong, their projected number 1 wide receiver back. He's also Taylor Green's roommate. So that great connection that we expected all year at Arkansas is finally going to be there. So that's great. Jaquindon Jackson is busting 80-yard touchdowns and waving to UAPB cheerleaders while he's doing it. I mean, that is a viral clip if I've ever seen one. So the Arkansas offense is back. I think there's going to be a problem defensively here. Travis Williams is a great defensive coordinator for Arkansas, but he loves cover 0. He has one of the highest rates of blitz. There's a little whispers out there that Gus Malzahn wasn't too sad to see him leave UCF because of his heavy aggressiveness and because of his cover 0 tendencies. He has free reign to call the plays on defense for Arkansas. And if you're going to run cover 0 or you're going to run some sort of aggressive blitz, you don't want to do it against Alan Bowman. Alan Bowman has been the hot read quarterback king of the world at all of the stops that he's ever been. And we talked about this in the preseason pod. There is one wide receiver on this Oklahoma State offense that just kind of got forgotten about, injury, transferred to Washington State, and that's Dazon Stribling. Dazon Stribling had 8 targets last week, was electric against South Dakota State. And I say all of this because these defenses for Oklahoma State and Arkansas were bad. 109th and 117th graded out in coverages by PFF. The tackling was worse. Both were outside the top 100 in PFF per tackling. That takes me to Arkansas secondary. You got players like, I hate to call them out by name, but Hudson Clark and a couple of the guys in the safety room, horrific in defending passing attempts. Alan Bowman is going to go right at him. And that's just to say that Ollie Gordon is not going to run to the side of the defensive line of Arkansas that doesn't have Landon Jackson or Xavier Sori Jr. on the line. Those two were great, but they still missed tackles last week. The defense was much more rusty than the offense was. I expect a ton of points here. I expect Taylor Green to have success, but the defense of Arkansas over the middle at the safety, Alan Bowman is going to hit Dazon Stribling all day, and it's going to turn into 7 every time because we cannot tackle in the secondary. That has not been changed whatsoever. So full write-up just posted today on Thursday at Action Network. There's trouble here for Arkansas on the defensive side. So a lot of points. I hate to say, I'm not going to say go Pokes and put my fingers up, but that's where we're at.
All right. Make sure you check out that write-up on the Action Network app and actionnetwork.com. Before we get out of here, let's go. Bring it out. We will go 3 downs and then go for it on 4th down. We'll talk about our favorites, our favorite underdog money lines, our favorite bets of the weekend, and start on 1st down with some Friday Night Lights. So let's get right into it. We'll talk about the 2 FBS versus FBS games. Not a lot of college football on the weekday. I think that has to do with the NFL. NFL's coming out party with games on Thursday and Friday. They are just taking over every possible day that they can. So only 2 FBS versus FBS matchups during the week. Let's start with Duke and Northwestern. As of the time we're recording this, the total sitting around 37. Northwestern, small home favorite. I was waiting on this total. Some books opened at 45, I believe, and came all the way down across 37. I wanted the over, and I was just going to wait on the weather, right? This new Northwestern Stadium, which is beautiful. I can't wait to watch this game just from an optics perspective. On the lake in prime time against Duke. But I just thought this came down way too much. And, the weather can be a little finicky on the lake, so I was going to watch the wind. It doesn't look crazy. But Duke wants to run a ton of tempo. Their offense looked a little better as that game went on. Granted, it was against Elon. And, Northwestern, new quarterback. They kind of got their feet under them going up against a pretty good Miami, Ohio defense. I thought their offense looked a little better as the game went on. It's a scary over, but I think at 37 or better, it's a super low number for, when you consider the pace that Duke wants to use for me. So I'm going to get on the over. Maybe if the wind is howling, I'll look for a live over, but I thought this total came down too much. Colin, what are you seeing between Northwestern and Duke?
I agree with you. I mean, what you're going to need in this game is for Malik Murphy, the quarterback for Duke, to hit some explosive plays like he did against Elon to get to this over. There are 15-mile-an-hour crosswinds here at Ryan Field. I think we might need to inspect that a little bit more now that they've taken out essentially the side of the seats that are up against Lake Michigan. So not sure if the wind direction still applies. We'll keep our eyes on that. But
it
Malik
could change
Murphy,
quickly. Like you just never know, like a day or two out right on the lake, that it could be much worse. It could not be. So it's hard to say even 24 hours out.
We're not even to October. We're already talking about wind direction. You got to love it. So listen, Malik Murphy was pretty good against Elon last week. 26 of 40, 3 big time throws, 2 turnover worthy plays. Those 2 turnover worthy plays came on pressured pockets. So there was a little bit of a struggle there for him. First time starter, first game, kind of expected, but there was no rushing attack from Duke whatsoever. 2.2 yards per play on 27 attempts. They were stuffed 11 times. They were stuffed well over the national average of 30%. And the Duke defense was great. And it should have been with Manny Diaz as your head coach. Elon averaged 2.3 overall yards per play. So you would need, the Duke defense to let up a little bit from what they showed against Elon. And that might happen with Northwestern. Northwestern's running a heavy RPO with Vanderbilt transfer Mike Wright coming in here. On 11 third down attempts last week, Northwestern was pushed so far back in standard downs. Their average distance in third downs was 10.2 yards. That is large. But Wright ran the RPO, 9 rushes for 65 yards, 3 rushing attempts, went for over 15. He is explosive on the ground. He just can't throw the ball. Now, Cam Porter, the running back, not really a jump, and what kind of juice that he has. He averaged 2.3 yards after contact. Pretty pedestrian there. I think the total has come down too far. It's a number that I would project about 40.5. I took Northwestern on the cheap money line when it opened up. I feel that this is a 3-point battle. I don't think either of these teams are going to win by more than 3 points. So I think you're good if you can get a cheap money line here on Northwestern. And if Duke hits 3 or 3.5 before the market closes, or I can get it live, I will come back on that because it is going to be low scoring. But I agree with you. It's going to go over the 37 that's out there right now. And I like Northwestern at home to pull this off.
Yeah, I would certainly lean hard Duke's way if it gets to a field goal or above. Still, it's hard to, and this is the challenge not only with week 1, but with week 2, and it's going to carry over to week 3 as well, is that all of the roster turnover in college football evaluating, determining whether you overreact, how aggressively to update power ratings, especially when teams play group of 5 opponents. In week 1, we're going to see a lot in week 2 as well. So that's the challenge in today's new college football landscape, much more than it had been in the past, with just these just aggressive roster overhauls that we're seeing across the sport. The other FBS matchup on Friday night is between SMU and BYU. SMU around 11 and a half point favorite here, total sitting a touch over 55. BYU, their quarterback Retzlaff, I think, exceeded expectations last week. You know, granted, it was against an FCS team, but it wasn't a complete bottom feeder. SMU, I'm having trouble getting a true read on them through 2 weeks. The story on SMU the past few seasons is they struggled when they stepped up in class. They dominated teams that are a step below them. BYU, they're kind of in the middle, right? Transitioning still to a Power 4 team. I do expect improvement from the BYU defense under Jay Hill, a coordinator I like. And year 2, last year, ton of injuries, just horrible injury luck. And maybe the depth still isn't there, but early in the season, I do expect that defense to be better. SMU's case, he didn't really get a solid data point this past weekend. Didn't look great against Nevada, but maybe Nevada. I mean, Nevada's exceeded expectations 2 weeks in a row. Maybe that was more about Nevada. So I'm struggling with this one. Probably a pass for me. I think it'll be a solid data point for both teams. What are you seeing here?
SMU is turning into more of a mystery through 2 weeks, which is kind of troubling for somebody that loved their season win total over. I project the total at 52. So the fact that it's hanging around 55 and a half might be last call here for us to go get an under, with 55 being the biggest key number in totals. Let's talk about BYU first. I mean, they took on the Salukis from Carbondale, Southern Illinois. 8 of 12 drives had 2+ first downs. Available yards, 44% is the national average. BYU got up to 66%. That comes down to Jake Retzlaff at quarterback. 3 touchdowns, 3 big-time throws, no turnover-worthy plays, no interceptions, a 13.5 average depth of target. Impressive. I know it's still Southern Illinois, but we didn't expect that from BYU. And SMU, they're going to have to defend Chase Roberts. He lines up at the wideout. He lines up at the slot. After one game, 4.4 yards per route run. It won't hang that high, but after 8 targets, he looks pretty good. And Southern Illinois, you spoke about Jay Hill. We love him coming in from Weber, one of the best defensive coordinator hires that we've seen. And, it just didn't play out last year. They have to get turnover in the roster. But BYU did prevent Southern Illinois from creating a methodical or an explosive drive. They only had a 28% success rate on passing plays, and they averaged 3.3 yards per play. So the BYU defense is coming around. I know it's Southern Illinois, but it's better than what we've had the last couple of years. Now, the SMU portion I spoke about, Stuck, you would think that you would see a pretty good balance of pass and rush. That's not what we had against Houston Christian. 54 attempts on the ground, 23 passing attempts. Jalen Knighton didn't even run the ball due to injury. Preston Stone went 6 of 9. Kevin Jennings only had 14 passing attempts. What is this SMU offense? Why are we running the ball against Houston Christian when we need to get this timing, this Rhett Lashley offense going? We're running the ball 54 times without your lead rusher. It doesn't make sense to me whatsoever. So SMU's offense is not executing at the level that we expected coming into this season. Nevada played great. I mean, they had a lot of pass breakups, I think 5 of them on the day. But Houston Christian did not even try to attempt to pass the ball and get your offense in rhythm. Is a little scary for me. The BYU defensive front, the strength is the secondary. The front is where you can attack them. So maybe SMU was kind of setting up like we want to get our run game going because we know this is where we can attack BYU. And for that right there alone, I think it's worth an under. Probably going to hit it here while we're recording. I don't want it to dip under 55. I think SMU is going to be run heavy again. The methodical drives, I lean to the under here, but something's up with this SMU offense.
Yeah, you at least do know that they want to go fast, which is the only scary thing with an SMU under. But I wish you luck there. I'll probably be on the sidelines for that one. But let's move on to second down and talk our favorite overdogs. For those new here, those are our favorite favorites. Thanks to a voicemail caller. Don't forget about the voicemail this week, 955-BAD-BEAT for the podcast. Our podcast, by the way, the rest of our college football breakdown will be out later tonight, overnight. And we will have our recap episode, as always, that'll be out at the end of the weekend, including voicemails, and our live show, 10:30 a.m. Eastern, each and every Saturday. And by the way, that'll be on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you subscribe, hit that like button. Yes, I'm talking to you. If you haven't already. But let's move on to our favorite overdogs in second down. I'll kick things off. I'm going to go with Oregon. Going with the Ducks here. I think this is too much of an overreaction to what we saw last week. Just a really weird game against Idaho. They had 2 trick play touchdowns. Oregon's offensive line, their starting right guard, who I think is going to be back this week, was out. They kicked the center to right guard. They had a walk-on starting at center. A couple guys on defense barely played. Some of their starters. Lanning said they're okay. It was just like they didn't really need them. So I think you get a really focused effort last week. Now, Oregon's offense still put up a ton of yards. They dominated the game statistically. Boise's defense, as we saw last week, still broken. They have a ton of experience returning, but that doesn't always lead to improved results. And Georgia Southern put up 45 on them. Situationally, also, I think that this spot favors Oregon. Second straight home game. They're able to sit at home. Boise State went down to Statesboro against Georgia Southern. They're, in the heat and humidity, their defense is on the field for 85 plays. Now you got to go up, second straight road game, play Oregon. That defense did not look good. Lanning's entire focus here is going to be, let's stop Ashton Jeanty, one of the best backs in the country. But, going up against a Power 4 team, a lot different than going up against Mountain West foes. Maybe he breaks a few runs here, but I think we're getting Oregon on the cheap. This is one where I think the market overreacted too much. So with this line still under 20, I like Oregon at home. Where you going?
But I completely agree with you. I have Oregon over the total. And just a side note on that, I was told by somebody within the program at Big Ten Media Days, this is a bigger game than Oregon State. I still can't believe it. So within the program, I think they purposely went vanilla last week against Idaho for a reason. All right, I'm going to go Tennessee. It's funny. We made our selections. I usually make them like Wednesday night, early Thursday morning. About 10 hours ago, I said Tennessee -7.5 is going to be my overdog. That number's now 10. It got whacked today on Thursday, and I completely agree with it. I love the Volunteers here. They cruised over Chattanooga. NC State struggled with Western Carolina. So the question is, which one of those is real? Which one of these is fake? Is it a real variable that we need to inspect, and does it turn into a deliverable? And the answer from an NC State position is yes, there's a problem. NC State trailed Western Carolina in the fourth quarter to start it out. Grayson McCall had 9 pressures. 2 came from his blindside tackle, Anthony Belton. Now you're going to get James Pierce off the Tennessee defensive line coming at you when you gave up 9 pressures to Western Carolina. That's bad. 8 of 32 rushing attempts from NC State were stuffed by Western Carolina, that vaunted catamount defense that we all know about. And they got bailed out by Casey Concepcion. He just explosive saved the day in the fourth quarter. Dakari Collins had half of the team drops. It was a very unorganized performance. It was pretty terrible from a statistic standpoint in the trenches. And that's just not going to play out here. Western Carolina had 42 snaps in standard downs to 17 in passing downs. NC State just couldn't get them at long distances in third down. And I think that all goes back when you lose a player like linebacker Peyton Wilson, that's going to reflect on the rest of the team. I mean, that is a generational program player that has come through NC State, and now they're without him. The Catamounts did pretty well on offense, which nobody expected. So the question is, can NC State stop that spread of the Vols? That attack that they put on Chattanooga was disgustingly on point. The Volunteers are already in 5th gear. When they said that Nico was going to be able to, shoot it out on game 1, I was like, come on, game 1 he's going to be hot. He's already hot. And I think the other problem is Tony Gibson, who we love as a defensive coordinator with that 3-3-5. He exclusively runs cover 1 and cover 0. It's just not the way to beat the Tennessee defense. It's always quarters, cover 3, stab them at the line of scrimmage, mess up the timing routes. Cover 1, you don't have 2 guys back in that safety shell that can stop that. I will say that NC State, Aiden White, the corner, had 2 PBUs at one spot, so maybe he can kind of stop Brew McCoy or Thornton or some of their dynamic receivers. I don't see it. This Volunteers offense is in 5th gear in the second game of the season, and NC State has massive issues in the trench, and they're not going to be able to stop this Tennessee offense. This one's a runaway. Tennessee, I don't care the number. 10, probably going to go 11.
But let's move on to third down and go with our underdog moneyline parlay, our favorite moneyline underdogs of the week. I'm going to kick things off. I'm going to go San Jose State Spartan up. This is just last week I went with North Texas in a game with a ton of variance, teams turning over their rosters. Didn't know a lot about them. Well, we have that here as well. San Jose State, new coaching staff, a lot of new pieces, and Air Force. I mean, look, service academies usually just reload. They have huge rosters, but we still don't know a lot about this Air Force team, and they lost a ton, almost brought nothing back. So it could be one of those years where they are much worse than usual. Wasn't really impressed with their effort last week against Merrimack. Both these teams played in FCS school, so still a lot of uncertainty here. Underdog against a service academy. Guess what? New head coach for San Jose State knows a little bit about defending the triple option, which he saw for many years at Navy. And you're probably going to have San Jose State's probably going to have the best player on the field in Nick Nash, who went off last week at receiver. Not sure anyone on Air Force can contain him. That could be the difference. Give me San Jose State. Where you going?
Love that pick. Sacramento State looked good for a quarter before they got blown out by San Jose State. I'm going to go Michigan plus 240. Yeah, we're going to do. I'm probably the only person with this ticket, but it's pretty easy to see why this number steamed, right? Michigan misses a cover with Fresno. Texas puts a 50 burger, plus no points given to Colorado State. You get all this steam in the market on a number that was below a field goal the entire summer. So it has really been a huge reaction. The Michigan defense, they're going to be able to flex one of the best defensive lines in the nation against the Longhorns. 13 pressures were created against Fresno. They should be able to get to Quinn Ewers here, put a little pressure on him, see if he can change his path of his passing and create some mistakes. The corners were just outstanding for Michigan. There was a PBU for Jair Hill, for Amir Hall, interceptions for Will Johnson and Zeke Berry. I have no problems with the secondary handling what Quinn Ewers is going to throw. He has issues with timing routes. He's good on go routes and slants. We'll see if Michigan can take advantage of that and stop Isaiah Bond, Matthew Golden, Ryan Wingo. They're talented, but Michigan does have a secondary that can keep up. Now, the Michigan offense is the handicap. I mean, the reason we're here is because we've been talking about this all season, and we got a little glimpse of what it's going to be. Davis Warren, 15 of 25, 9 of his targets straight over the middle, shallow over the middle to Colston Loveland. You and I talked about it on Twitter. It's the Colston Loveland dot map about where Davis Warren is going to throw. But when you combine that with the inside zone that's run on the ground by Khalil Mullings, he averaged 6.1 yards per rushing attempt, a huge 4.3 after first contact. That kind of caught my eye. So it's a very cramped offense that's going to take place in a real small footprint on the field. The inside zone is going to go straight at the worst part of the Texas defense, which is their defensive interior. Bill Norton, Alfred Collins, Vernon Broughton. Those are the defensive interior starters for Texas. They had the 3 lowest run defense grades of any player on Texas through week 1 against Colorado State. The trio created 1 stop and 27 Colorado State rushing attempts. The defense alone, you switch over to the pass, are they going to be able to get to Davis Warren? I don't think so. The defense produced just 7 pressures against Colorado State. Texas defensive line created only 7 pressures, 0 sacks, and 57 passing attempts by Colorado State. You could say, well, maybe Texas just went base defense and they didn't blitz anybody. I would still think a 4-man rush from Texas could create more than 7 pressures and record a sack. They didn't get anything done against Colorado State. I think the one thing other people aren't looking at, Davis Warren can throw the ball fast. 2.1 time to throw. He gets rid of it pretty fast. I know it's short passes and it's little dump offs.
He's
but
just throwing to running backs. He was just there.
He's just tight end too. But I don't think you're going to get any sacks here. I mean, they're not going to get any pressures. They're not going to get any sacks. I think Michigan's going to have success here running inside zone and little dump offs over the offensive line. To me, this is Sharon Moore completely calling a service academy offensive game. They're going to nail this down to about 7 possessions. They're going to turn it into a rock fight. They're going to make the defenses win this game. And when you put it from that perspective, I trust the Michigan defense on a defensive line and in the secondary way more than I do that Texas secondary and this Texas defensive line that cannot stop the run. Look for Michigan to service academy it up. I like them to win outright.
Moneyline dogs, Michigan and San Jose State. Before we get out of here, just 20 seconds on our favorite bets. I'm going to go Northern Illinois over 4 touchdowns against Notre Dame. Just historically, a lot of trends back this up, but a really bad spot for Notre Dame after that huge emotional win, physical game. Not a team that I mind fading as a huge favorite. Northern Illinois is worried about their quarterback play. They played nobody last week, but Ethan Hampton actually looked good. Ton of experience on this team. I think that they'll be motivated, right, in the area of Notre Dame, wanting to, a lot of these kids didn't get recruited there. So too many points here in what should be a lower scoring game. Give me Northern Illinois. Where you go?
Yeah, I agree. I'm going South Carolina, team total under 16.5. We mentioned it on the recap podcast. South Carolina is really bad. I will just, we'll have more on the main pod, but let me just talk about where South Carolina's average starting field position was against an Old Dominion team that they barely beat. First possession, they were spotted the ball on the Old Dominion 3-yard line. A couple possessions later, they were spotted the ball on the Old Dominion 25. And the fourth quarter, they were spotted the ball on the Old Dominion 6-yard line. Though those resulted in 17 of the 23 points scored by South Carolina. When you look at what their offense is, it's Lenoris Sellers running RPO with Rocket Sanders. That is not going to work against Kentucky's defensive front, who outside of Georgia may be the best defensive front seven in all of college football. They are that talented. And RPO inside zone is not going to work from South Carolina because you couldn't even run it against ODU. So give me South Carolina under 16.5 points.
Stop what you're doing right now and subscribe to the newest college sports YouTube channel.
College football is around the corner, and the new BBOC channel is your destination for betting on college sports.
Interviews with former college athletes and other topics such as College Football 25.
Subscribe now and get in on the action.
All right, that'll do it for us. Thanks to Colin, as always, for joining me. Thanks to our producer, Matt Mitchell, on the back end. Most importantly, thanks to all of you for joining us. Make sure you subscribe, unsubscribe, subscribe. Tell a friend, tell an enemy. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and like button if you're watching on YouTube. Really appreciate you helping us grow that new channel. And leave a 5-star review. You can say whatever you want. Let me know if you're joining me on the trash this weekend. It's going to be ugly. I'm expecting to get plenty of voicemails and probably lose plenty of money. But it'll be an interesting day, to say the least. But 5-star review, that'll really help us out. I'll do a bunch of giveaways throughout the year. All you got to do is leave a 5-star review. Make sure, again, check out the Group of 5 guys. Live show, Saturday, 10:30 a.m. Eastern. Recap episode, 959 bad beat for those voicemails. We'll be out Monday morning, and then we'll do it all again next week. Good luck on all of your wagers this weekend, and we'll catch y'all on Saturday morning. Cheers.
Peace out.